Welcome to this very special show. I am your host Sanjay Pugalia. Today we will explore India's economic journey with two of its sharpest minds, one who led the previous Finance Commission and the other currently in charge of it. India's journey has been marked by ups and downs and shortcuts and sharp turns. As we embark on ambitious mission of building a Viksit Bharat as envisioned by our Prime Minister Narendra Modi, let us focus on new generation of reforms, those we need the most and without any delay. What will it take to ensure both ease of living and ease of doing business in India? A warm welcome to Mr. N.K. Singh and Mr. Panagariya. Thank you for your time, sir. Exactly just before the budget and with an ambitious plan of Viksit Bharat, we are trying hard as a country to come up with a roadmap which really takes us there. The current economic structure requires some serious reforms. This has been discussed all the time. But now is the time where there is an aggressive clarity and plan, aggressive clear plan. So I will start with Mr. Panagariya. You have just written a book and you have considered all aspects of our economic priorities. So what are your opening remarks?
Okay, no, there is a lot that we have done in the past, including under the current Prime Minister Modi, and there is a lot left to be done. I would start, say, with the implementation of the 4 labor codes. These are labor codes which we had enacted in the Parliament in 2019 and 2020, but their implementation is still to be done. So I think that would be, that in some sense today is the low-hanging fruit. Once that is out of the way, there is a whole host of reforms which have to do with the GST, personal income taxation, privatization, higher education reform. So there are areas, I've always felt that reform is a long drawn ongoing process. It's not a one time deal. We for good reason celebrate 1991, but that was just the beginning. 3 decades later we still have things to do.
Yeah. So 91 reference comes very often, Mr. Singh. What we need to understand to go forward now, that some past experience has to be understood in the correct perspective, so we don't make those mistakes. There is still a great overhang of centralized command and control economy. The economic activity has to be led by public sector, over importance on public sector enterprises with strong bureaucratic control. These legacies, the baggage we have to shed.
No, I agree fully with what you are saying, and in the light of what my friend Arvind Panagariya has said, that there is a lot which has been achieved in the last few years under the Prime Ministership of Prime Minister Modi. A lot more needs to be done. But since your question is directly on the overhang and the shadows of what circumstances led to 1991, the fact remains that we were under the shadow of Fabian socialism. That baggage determined the course of economic strategy and policy, beginning from our independence with the constitution of the Planning Commission, a controlled economy, a controlled planned economy with micromanagement. And we have, in spite of repeated attempts, not fully been able to shed that mind. That kind of an overhang of the mindset reflects itself on the difficulties which we are encountering in the reforms of the factors of production, which was partly alluded. Labor is one, capital is the other, in terms of our ability to look at the most efficient modalities for banking intermediation, making capital available at efficient cost. In terms of availability of land, for instance, I think that we have not been able to get out of the fact, and to make India a competitive destination for not only doing business, but also making India an attractive place for being able to harness our export capability and to manage our balance of payments in a credible way.
Right. Just to clarify, last 10 years under Prime Minister Modi, a lot has been achieved, and in previous years also. So what I meant when I said in the previous time, what I meant was there are 4 reference points basically comes to us. What Mr. Nehru did, then what Mr. Manmohan Singh and PV Narasimha Rao did, what Mr. Vajpayee did. There are 4 important turning points as far as economic governance is concerned. So before I proceed further on what to do, I want some insights from both of you, that how do you see the pre-Modi era in terms of reforms, because many of the people, many section of people believe that the real trigger point of great reform in this country happened in 1991.
So trigger certainly was 1991, although it was preceded a little bit under Rajiv Gandhi, particularly in his budget of 1985-86. It was a reformist budget, but Rajiv Gandhi was unable to build on where he started. Whereas once Prime Minister Narasimha Rao had done away with the investment licensing and partially at least with import licensing, we continued to build on those reforms. So I think this is why 1991 becomes more critical. Nevertheless, you know, one of the themes of my recent book, The Nehru Development Model, is that the thinking and the economic structure that we built during Prime Minister Nehru's time. So this what you call the overhang. So there was the philosophy was socialism, and the economic structure was very much built on the heavy industry. Those 2 features that we really inherited after Nehru have continued to haunt us. Whether you look at the political leadership of any era post-Nehru, or you look at the bureaucracy, or you look at the intellectuals, including my own tribe, our own tribe, the economists, or bureaucrats, where we can count Mr. N.K. Singh once again. This philosophy of socialism remains very, very entrenched. And that is one of the key reasons why reforms in India have taken much longer. The other way that overhang remains is the kind of structure of the economy that we inherited, and the interaction between the socialist thought and this particular structure. We started with heavy industry, neglecting the light industry. So clothing, footwear, all kinds of products of everyday need like umbrellas, your kitchenware, etc., etc. These were largely neglected, at least we had no large scale production of these products. And we emphasized in our formal economy the heavy industry, the machinery, the steel, the eventually the electronics also came in there. But largely that structure that we inherited seems to have continued. Today, what are our successful industries? These are petroleum refining first and foremost, but machinery industry is very successful. Our information technology industry is successful. Pharmaceutical is very successful. Financial sector is successful. Largely sectors which are capital intensive or skilled labor intensive. But you know, the mass of the labor largely still remains in agriculture, about 45%, another 40% in these very micro and small enterprises which employ less than 10 workers. So these are relatively low productivity employments, and that structure that we inherited, now it's somewhat altered, and we have certainly moved a little bit further into light industry, but that structural transformation is still underway. So those are the features, I think, you know, which still we are trying to grapple with.
Yeah. So let us pick up this point that structural transformation has to still happen. So what are the key areas you would like to extend your theme on this, that we need to focus on right now?
So first of all, I think that I totally agree that we inherited and have sought to consolidate during the period of Mr. late Jawaharlal Nehru, Fabian socialism in a certain sense, that having stopped short of totally eliminating private sector, the Fabian socialism, which you know by definition, only provides you a transitional path till you are able to embrace socialism. If you look at the speeches, he regards socialism as an end in itself in a certain sense of the term. Maybe the circumstances of that time made it necessary for him to undertake this. But the fact remains, three important facts remain. First and foremost, let us say whatever may have been the reasons for having adopted in the initial years of India's independence, our inability to shed off the baggage of the past and to be able to look to the future. We continue to harbor that same mindset for a very long time, including till today. If someone were to ask me the question, with 1991 economic reforms, great things happened, I say, yeah, some very terrific things happened, but there was also a terrific incomplete agenda. That incomplete agenda of the 1991 economic reforms emanates from the fact that there is a baggage of the political entities, there is a political entities embedded in a socialist mindset, economists in that same mindset, the command and control thing influencing the thinking of the bureaucracy. That mindset, if you ask me the question, we have not been even to fully shed. And the fact remains that in spite of repeated warnings, look, in 66 and 67 after devaluation, we had an opportunity, Sanjay, we missed that. In 80-81, we resorted to a huge support by the International Monetary Fund. We were not able to take that as a message to look to structural, deep structural reforms. Why did we have to wait till the time of Prime Minister Modi, even during the pandemic, made that far-reaching announcement and pronouncement that public enterprises have little or no role to play except in very strategic areas. And that took such a long time in the pandemic for him to be able to do so. We carried this somehow forward. So we made incremental changes. We did not make transformative changes. 1991 gave us no options but to make the kind of changes which we did, but we did not complete that process to its logical conclusion for enabling Mr. Modi to undertake that far-reaching decision. And even that decision which had been taken to leave has not touched many areas of the economy. For instance, the difficulties in making far-reaching changes in the banking sector. Cost of capital continues to be very high. Financial intermediation continues to be high. Competition in the banking sector is still very tardy. In terms of labor, harnessing something that Arvind said, missed out the opportunity of the comparative factor advantage of labor in promoting labor-intensive industries. We have failed in that, others have gone ahead. In terms of availability of land and recognizing that at reasonable cost of land, it will give you growth multipliers, and you could find multiple ways to be able to attract in terms of making deep reforms of the agricultural sector in consonance with changes which we see, particularly the consonance of the changes in environmental and other factors. We have therefore a daunting agenda ahead, and this daunting agenda needs to be addressed if we are to realize our quest to become a developed economy by 47. Another important area of economic reforms is to do away with this constant cycle of elections taking place every second day. This distracts from governance, this distracts from the promises made to the electorate, fritters the energy into wasteful freebies expenditure, leads to higher fiscal deficit, puts a strain on every segment of the governance process, from policemen to teachers to health workers. I do believe that the initiative which has been taken in introducing this bill in Parliament for one nation, one election constitutes a very, very far-reaching, important reforms far beyond the political matrix, which has huge implications for economic growth and development.
If I may add on this very, very important issue that Mr. Singh has mentioned, one nation, one election. When elections happen repeatedly, it also impacts the government's ability to introduce reforms. The current situation actually provides a good example that May 2024, we had the parliamentary elections, and since then we have been having one or another election every 6 months. And that obviously denies the government the ability to bring in major reforms, because they then become the bone of contention during the elections. Even now, if we look up, it appears there is a 1-year window, but even during this 1-year window, you got the election in Delhi, you got the election in Bihar. So, when these repeated elections happen, they, as Mr. Singh has said, they really impact the ability, the governance, everything, and that has far-reaching implications for economic growth. So if this very, very important reform actually takes place, I think reforms will move faster.
Mr. Singh, very well put. You have just summarized what needs to be done. Just to repeat, land, labor, cost of capital, cost of financial intermediation, and all kind of bottlenecking that needs to be removed. I think our Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, is very much aware of this. We all know that he wants to do this. Now this is 11th year of his governance. What do you think he will be able to accomplish right now and then in short term to medium term?
So let me put it this way to you. He is jealously going to pursue this national quest of India becoming a developed economy. He does not require a person of the intelligence of Mr. Modi to realize that you have to make the changes in some of the factors of production. It will be unfair to say that changes have not taken place. Look, we have put the GST, which simplifies the modalities of taxation. Of course, a lot more needs to be done on the GST reforms itself in terms of simplification of rates, in terms of broad banding and so on. But putting that GST itself was important. On the bankruptcy bill to facilitate faster exit of industry, on the non-performing assets of the bank having come down very significantly, on the adoption of the labor code in being able to secure a degree of consensus which enables some states to go forward in implementing the rules which are necessary for that. In terms of land acquisition, some of this has begun in the states of Maharashtra and Gujarat, other states need to be able to. So things are beginning to happen in a credible way. He would like to see this process speeded up by continuing these transformative changes to make India an important global power.
So to speed up, what all will be required, because there is one view that to achieve the goal of Viksit Bharat, even 7% growth is not enough to make us advanced economy. And to be able to deliver that, certain things that you have just spelled out requires immediate attack, immediate action has to start. What gives you the confidence that this will happen right away?
So, look, first of all, just I want to join what Mr. N.K. Singh said about what has happened under Prime Minister Modi. We forget actually that the Prime Minister inherited a very fragile economy. In the last 2 or 3 years of the UPA rule, things had really gone south. This was the time when some of the worst legislations were put in place. When I say overhang of socialism, it very much kind of struck with vengeance. We had the Right to Education Act, which really ended up being more of a kind of barrier to quality education than promoting it. We had the Land Acquisition Act, which clearly made the task of the Prime Minister who succeeded the UPA incredibly hard in terms of land being priced very highly. Today, for example, even in a linear project such as roads and railways, the land cost, particularly in the roads, the land cost itself becomes 3/4 of the entire project. So you can see that what that means is that if for the same resources, if you could construct 2 kilometers of road, you are able to construct only 1 kilometer of road. And yet, what an amazing feat the government has accomplished in terms of building the road network of the country. I mean, this is one area in which everybody comes out incredibly impressed with what the government has done. So there are a lot of these fragilities. Also, the environmental clearances at the time had completely stopped in a way that hardly any projects were progressing or moving ahead. So all of those bottlenecks had to be cleared up, they got cleaned up. Then the Prime Minister proceeded to do some of the most difficult reforms which had not happened. You see, the early on were the low hanging fruits. The abolition of investment licensing, import licensing, these were the things that had been in discussion throughout the 1980s. Even under VP Singh, there was an earlier 1990 investment industrial policy that had been actually approved. It just didn't get implemented because VP Singh lost the majority. So that industrial policy itself went 2/3 of the way to what 1991 industrial policy was. So these were relatively low hanging fruits. These were what was done now actually have been the toughest reforms. Also then, so GST and the bankruptcy code. I mean, I had been writing on bankruptcy code for almost 20 years. Finally, it came, it got done. Labor laws, again, this is something I had been writing for same 20 years. Finally got done. We still need to implement them, but they have been enacted. And of course, other part of infrastructure, railways, civil aviation. Today, the whole infrastructure and above all, of course, the digital infrastructure. So first of all, that is something quite incredible, unprecedented. And what we will be able to build on the existing, now what we have done with the digital infrastructure is still a lot of the return on that digital infrastructure is still to come. So having said that, now what gives us confidence? This is the question that you had asked. What gives us the confidence that this can still be done? Again, look back last 20 years of history. If I take 2003-04 to 2022-23, India's GDP growth rate in terms of dollars, first current dollars. In current dollars, 10.2%. People don't realize it actually that in dollar terms, we have actually grown very rapidly. And indeed, even if I take out the GDP deflator for that, which is the US GDP deflator, because we're talking in terms of dollar, GDP growth rate in real dollars ends up being 7.9% for this period. Okay. So now, our per capita income from where it is at about at 2000, let's say about roughly $2,500. It's a little bit below, but we'll say $2,500. In order to get there, our per capita income, meaning to Viksit Bharat, right? The definition of the World Bank, which is the generally accepted definition, is a per capita income of something close to maybe about $13,000, a little below, in 2022 dollars. So from our $2,500, you require something like a growth rate of the per capita income of about 7.6%.
Right.
I think it's very much doable because we have done 7.9% for the GDP. But now our population is growing much more slowly. Even if you take the UN estimates of growth rate of population, maybe around 0.5, 0.5% rate of growth is maximum we are going to experience in the years till 2047. So that's 7.9 has to go from 7.6 is what we required. add 0.5 or 0.6, 8.1 to 8.2, 8.1 to 8.2%. It is,
That will take
it
us.
looks very close. 7.9 we have already done, 8.1, 8.2. I think that becomes very doable. And a lot of the return to the reforms that have been done, as well as a lot more reforms to come, are still there in our bag.
True. Reforms to come. We want to know more about that. And one big component, the big actor, are the states. Mr. Modi always mentions it, that a lot has to be now done by the states. There has to be a serious competition among them to reach there. What do you think that states still ought to do a lot more in what areas?
So, following up on what Mr. N.K. Singh has just said, one area where states are incredibly critical is land. You see, the land is almost entirely, except for land acquisition, is a state subject. And this is where states can do quite a lot. Now, take for example, in terms of our cities, right? We really don't have anything, even the closest that comes Bombay, but even Bombay doesn't come anything close to something what
It
is
is not a
Singapore.
global city. We can't call it. It doesn't
not a
have the
global
stature and the gravitas of being a global city.
Exactly. I mean, so it's not Singapore, it's not New York, it's not Boston, it's not LA. So we really, the states have to get into act of building these global cities. And one of the things that policy moves that the states have to do is to start changing what we call this floor space index. Meaning, in effect, what that means is allowing taller and taller buildings to be built.
So how can now Delhi nudge these states to really go very bold on these aspects?
Well, Delhi can certainly use the leverages it has with the states in terms of both some of the laws related, meaning things related to labor laws, or what kind of rules will apply related to the factor markets, rules that will apply to the imports and exports of the products. For example, if you think of the coastal states, then a lot of the development of virtually any country that you look at, whether it is the United States, or it is South Korea, or it is Taiwan, Singapore, it happens around close to the coast. And so what rules apply around the coast in terms of labor laws particularly, but also the entry and exit of products, meaning the policies with respect to trade. There's a lot of the processing, can be much speeded up if locations are around the coast. The components come in, you assemble them, a lot of the processing is done. It's like the way we are seeing the emergence of the Apple phones, the iPhones around the eastern coast of India. Something similar ought to be built up, and that's where certainly it's possible for the central government to incentivize that, both in terms of the kinds of ecosystems that should apply to some of these special zones. We can go back, do something on the special economic zones legislation that can be that does require a little bit of amendment to facilitate some of the these kinds of activities in a seamless way in these zones. These are some of the things that the central government can do, but of course now the state governments have to do. They have to take charge. I mean,
this is very fascinating what you just now described. This is very fascinating. To conclude this part of conversation, Mr. Singh, I have a question for you, which is, Mr. Modi has many persona in himself. At times he appears to be aggressive believer of free market capitalism. He is centrist, and he is a hardcore socialist also, which is manifested via his social welfare schemes. One can accuse him of having some Nehru in him. So my question is, what persona going forward will see of Mr. Modi, which will tell us that for reform he is not only very decisive, he is going to execute something very mind-boggling very, very soon?
Well, very frankly speaking, I think that all political entities, all iconic political entities cannot be entirely symmetrical in their behavioral responses. Deep down, any political entity who has a modicum of understanding of history and legacy will realize that India's number one problem remains improving the life quality of its people, for which a much deeper dent on poverty, on indices of human resource development, on quality of education, on the quality of health and the human capital remains a very, very important driving factor. Now, that you do not have to be a Nehruvian to believe in the importance of some of these things for bringing about a welfare-oriented inclusive growth. You have to realize that all this will come not through redistribution, but will come through a much faster rate of economic growth. After all, you cannot be very well off if the same pie is distributed more and more, which is what the leftists believe. But the pie must grow. It must grow in a manner and an extent to which we want to become a developed India, which implies all this. I think a deeper reforms are required. I think we haven't discussed that in the area of education, human capital, going away from the Right to Education Act into the new NEP, in being able to harness and inculcate educational and pedagogy. Second, in the area of health and healthcare. And finally, one of the factors which is going to very decisively help India is the ability to harness technology in a very, very meaningful way. We are at the cutting edge of being able to integrate what AI has to offer as part of our pedagogy, using AI to improve agriculture, health, education, and it is going to be a very, very powerful enabler to improve what economists like us would like to call total factor productivity, incremental capital output ratio, in improving the overall competitive efficiency of the economy, which will make India's task of achieving a developed economy much easier than simple arithmetic would suggest.
Absolutely. Both of you, yes sir, you wanted to add something.
I just want to add to something, to the question that you have asked Mr. N.K. Singh. I see Prime Minister Modi a little differently than you described. I think of Prime Minister Modi as a holistic Prime Minister. On technology, he wants to remain on the cutting edge.
Yeah.
So you saw the leading AI experts from the United States, passing through conversations with the Prime Minister. He really likes to be on the cutting edge of technology in all areas. He wants the economy to grow, but he also has another side. He doesn't want to leave anybody behind.
True.
Yes.
And so he works on what are the growth centers, where the growth is going to come from, facilitation of growth, all that. But he also wants to ensure that both regionally and in terms of the population, he carries India with him. So while he sees what is going on in Maharashtra and Gujarat and Tamil Nadu, etc., he also has his eye on the Northeast.
Absolutely.
He wants to develop Northeast. And this is nothing new. I mean, I remember my very first meeting as the Vice Chairman of the Niti Aayog in January 2015. Number of things he listed in that long meeting of about 2 to 3 hours, included everything: development of Northeast, development of the islands, things that we had neglected.
True.
Similarly, while he talks about the ease of doing business, he also talks about ease of living for people.
Absolutely.
So he, in a way, really has a very wide sweep.
Absolutely.
I think this is very much differs from Nehru. That Nehru sort of was very focused on industrialization.
True. So many a times we are kind of victim of trying to fit things into a certain basket or ism, Mr. Modi is beyond that. So
Beyond that.
I agree with you that you can't fit him in a particular school of thought.
can't box him.
He is, yeah, you can't box him with one ism. He is different persona for different problem, and his solutions are different. And that is why he is kind of unconventional and
Yes,
extremely
very
bold
much so.
politician. I can clearly sense both of you have been critical part of our last 10 years economic governance, and before that also you have been part of more than 5 decades, I would say, as far as economic governance is concerned. We have got fascinating insights that what is being considered, what is being discussed, and what could happen. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Pleasure.